the quiet canvas. The cool, smooth glass of the mirror offered Milo a familiar reflection, a face both ordinary and striking depending on the light. He traced the line of his jaw with a thumb, a habit he'd developed early in his career, an unconscious check for any new blemishes or shadows that might betray a sleepless night. His eyes, a shade of deep moss green, held a quiet intensity, a depth that often surprised those who only saw his reserved demeanor. He was ready, or as ready as he ever was, for another day of being looked at, posed, and ultimately captured. The apartment, a compact space in a pre-war building, smelled faintly of stale coffee and the crisp, clean scent of the fabric softener he used on his worn denim jacket. Sunlight, filtered through the grimy window pane, illuminated dust motes dancing in the still air. He preferred the quiet hum of the city waking up to any music, finding a strange comfort in the distant rumble of traffic and the occasional shriek of a siren. It was a world happening outside, while he existed in his own carefully constructed bubble. He ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled dark hair, which always seemed to fall just so, even without conscious effort. Today's job was for a lesser-known streetwear brand, likely another series of stoic gazes and artfully casual poses. He didn't mind. The work was predictable, the pay steady, and the anonymity of being a face among many suited him. He wasn't after fame, only the means to support his own quiet artistic pursuits. The canvases stacked against the far wall of his tiny living room, waiting for his touch. He picked up his faded canvas messenger bag, its weight a familiar comfort against his hip. Inside, a well-thumbed paperback, a sketchbook filled with intricate charcoal drawings, and a small tin of mints, his essentials for navigating the often chaotic world of a photo shoot. As he locked the door behind him, the click echoed in the silent hallway. Another day, another role to play, another face to present to the world. Miles away, in a penthouse studio overlooking the bustling expanse of the city, Sebastian ran a frustrated hand through his perfectly sculpted silver hair. The vast, minimalist space, usually a hub of creative energy, felt stagnant, oppressive. He stared at the giant calendar projected onto the pristine white wall, a grid of looming deadlines and uninspired concepts. The Ascendance Collection read the bold lettering for his next major campaign, a title that promised innovation, power, and a groundbreaking vision. And he had nothing. His assistant, Lena, a whirlwind of efficiency and unwavering optimism, popped her head around the corner of his private office. "Coffee, Sebastian? Triple espresso, black, as requested." He nodded, not tearing his gaze from the calendar. "Thanks, Alina. Any luck with the casting calls? I need someone fresh. Not another one of those interchangeable faces the agencies keep sending over." His voice, usually a smooth baritone, held an edge of impatience. Lena set the mug on his desk, the rich aroma momentarily cutting through his creative block. "We've seen everyone. The usual suspects, some intriguing new faces. But I know what you mean. No one's really leaping out." She gestured towards the wall of contact sheets tacked up beside the calendar. Hundreds of faces, all undeniably beautiful, but none possessed the spark he was desperately seeking. Sebastian picked up a random contact sheet, his eyes scanning the array of expressions. Too polished, too confident, too eager to please. He needed vulnerability, a quiet strength, an enigmatic quality that would draw the viewer in without shouting for attention. His previous campaigns had been defined by bold, almost aggressive beauty. For the Ascendance Collection, he envisioned something more subtle, more profound. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawling beneath him like a complex living organism. He'd built an empire on his discerning eye, his ability to coax emotion from the most stoic of subjects. But lately, that well of inspiration felt dry, choked by the demands of commercial success. He felt the familiar pressure mounting, the need to surpass himself, to deliver something truly extraordinary. "Expand the search, Lena," he commanded, turning back to face her, his eyes alight with a renewed determination. "Go beyond the usual agencies. Look for models who might not even see themselves as models. I want someone with a story in their eyes, someone who doesn't try too hard, someone who can just be." Lena's brow furrowed slightly, but she nodded, already mentally revising her strategy. "Understood, Sebastian. It'll be a needle in a haystack, but I'll make some calls." He watched her go, then returned to the calendar. The red circle around the Ascendance collection seemed to pulse, a constant reminder of the blank slate that needed to be filled. He took a sip of his coffee, the bitter warmth a jolt to his system. He had a feeling, a faint tremor of intuition, that the person he was looking for was out there. He just needed to find them. And the clock, as always, was ticking. A striking discovery. The insistent trill of his phone shattered the quiet hum of Milo's morning. He'd been in the middle of sketching a particularly intricate shadow play cast by his window frame, the graphite whispering across the page. With a sigh, he set down his pencil, his fingers still smudged with lead. It was Marcus, his agent. Milo rarely received calls this early unless it was truly urgent. "Milo, you awake?" Marcus's voice, usually a cheerful bellow, was tinged with an uncharacteristic excitement. "Barely. What's up?" Milo tucked the phone between his ear and shoulder, reaching for his cooling mug of herbal tea. "Up? Milo, this is the call. Remember how I mentioned Sebastian's Ascendance collection? The one everyone's been whispering about for months?" Milo vaguely recalled Marcus's enthusiastic ramblings about Sebastian's previous campaigns, though the names and details often blurred into a single, high-gloss image in his mind. "I think so. High fashion, big budget, all that." "Exactly. Well, they're looking for a face. Not just a face, Milo, but the face. And Sebastian himself saw your portfolio. Said you had presence, soul even. Wanted you in for a casting tomorrow, possibly a direct booking." Milo nearly dropped his mug. Sebastian, the name alone carried a weight in the industry, synonymous with groundbreaking vision and unparalleled artistry. This wasn't just another catalogue shoot or an editorial spread for an obscure indie magazine. This was major. It was the kind of job that launched careers, the kind that might, ironically, make his anonymity harder to maintain. "Sebastian? Really?" Milo felt a prickle of nerves, a sensation he rarely experienced before a job. His carefully constructed comfort zone suddenly felt permeable. "Yes, really. This is massive, Milo. We're talking top tier. I've already sent them your availability. Just be there, be yourself, and let your eyes do the talking, okay? I'll send you the details." Marcus's excitement was infectious, even through the phone line. This could be a game changer for you. A game changer. The phrase echoed in Milo's mind long after he hung up. He looked at his half-finished sketch, the delicate interplay of light and shadow, and wondered if this new, unexpected light would eclipse the quiet corner of his world he so cherished. Across the city, in a minimalist studio bathed in the cool, even glow of diffused light, Sebastian ran a restless hand through his already disheveled hair. A stack of portfolios lay open before him, on a vast, unblemished white table. Each face stared up at him, beautiful, polished, impeccably styled, and each, in its own way, felt empty. He was looking for a story, a flicker of something authentic that could anchor the ethereal concept of ascendance. He needed depth, not just surface. His assistant Lena quietly placed another thick book before him. Last one from Marcus's agency, Sebastian. He really pushed this guy. Sebastian nodded distractedly, already anticipating another perfectly chiseled jawline and vacant gaze. He flipped open the portfolio. The first few shots were standard, clean, professional, but nothing that made him pause. Then, he turned a page, and his breath hitched. It was a black and white portrait. Not a typical studio shot, but something more intimate, almost candid. The subject, a young man, was looking slightly off camera, his head tilted just so. His features were striking, high cheekbones, a strong nose, and a mouth that hinted at a subtle melancholy. But it was his eyes that truly arrested Sebastian. They were dark, deep, holding a quiet intensity that felt profound, almost ancient. They seemed to hold a world of unspoken thoughts, a rare vulnerability that resonated deeply with Sebastian's vision. There was no artifice, no performative smile, just raw, compelling honesty. He traced the line of the man's jaw with a finger, a strange pull drawing him in. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "Milo," Lena supplied, checking her tablet. "Pretty new to the major scene, but Marcus insists he's got something special. Very reserved, apparently. An artist in his spare time." An artist. That explained the depth. Sebastian felt a surge of creative energy, a spark that had been dormant for weeks. This wasn't just a pretty face. This was a canvas waiting for his brush, a narrative waiting to be told. The man's image possessed an inherent quietude, a strength that wasn't loud but resonated profoundly. "Get him in," Sebastian said, his voice firm, decisive. "No, wait. Don't just get him in for a casting. Book him for the main campaign." Lena blinked, surprised. "Sebastian, are you sure? We usually do a callback, a screen test." "I'm sure," he interrupted, his gaze still fixed on Milo's photograph. "This is it. This is the face of ascendance." A subtle smile touched Sebastian's lips, the first genuine one in days. The creative block had just found its unlikely, captivating muse. First impressions. The chrome and glass facade of Sebastian's studio gleamed under the midday sun, a stark contrast to the familiar brick and ivy of Milo's own apartment building. Milo clutched his worn sketchbook a little tighter, its familiar weight a small comfort against the nervous flutter in his stomach. Stepping inside, the air hummed with a different kind of energy than he was used to. Not the quiet hum of his pencil on paper, but the thrum of industry. Assistants bustled past, their hushed conversations punctuated by the click of camera lenses and the distant murmur of music. Elena Ramirez, a woman whose sleek bob and even sleeker suit radiated efficiency, met him with a polite, if somewhat detached smile. "Milo, welcome. Sebastian is just finishing up a call. We'll get you prepped." Her eyes, sharp and assessing, took in his slightly rumpled artist's attire, then flickered to the sketchbook. "Anything interesting in there?" she asked, a hint of genuine curiosity softening her tone. Milo offered a shy smile. "Just some observations. Nothing for a campaign, I assure you." Eleanor gave a dry chuckle. "I'm sure Sebastian will disagree. He has a knack for finding beauty in the unexpected." She led him through a labyrinth of white corridors and open-plan spaces, eventually depositing him in a spacious changing room. Clothes, exquisitely tailored and in a rich palette of earth tones and deep blues, hung on racks, each piece a silent testament to Sebastian's aesthetic. A makeup artist, a whirlwind of brushes and powders, worked with practiced ease, transforming Milo's everyday look into something refined, yet still undeniably him. When Sebastian finally emerged from his office, his presence filled the room. He moved with an effortless grace, his dark eyes instantly locking onto Milo. There was an intensity there that both unnerved and fascinated Milo. Milo, good to finally meet you in person. His voice was deeper than Milo had imagined, a smooth baritone that resonated with quiet authority. Ready to begin? The first few frames were a blur of flashes and murmured instructions. Sebastian, surprisingly hands-on, adjusted a collar, tweaked a posture, always with a respectful distance. He spoke in a language of light and shadow, directing Milo with a sculptor's precision. Chin up, just slightly. Good. Now, look past the lens, as if you're seeing something in the distance, something you're contemplating. Milo tried to channel the quiet introspection he often found in his own art. He thought of the half-finished canvas on his easel, the way the morning light hit the old oak tree outside his window, the complex interplay of colors in a fading sunset. He felt himself settling into the role, less a model and more a vessel for Sebastian's vision. After an hour, the energy in the studio shifted. Sebastian, after reviewing a series of shots on a large monitor, leaned back, a faint frown creasing his brow. "They're good," he said, the word trailing off with a hint of dissatisfaction. He turned to Milo, his gaze thoughtful. "But I feel there's more. We're capturing the surface. I want to see the depth I saw in your portrait." Eleanor, who had been observing from the sidelines, stepped forward. "Perhaps a change of wardrobe, something less structured?" Sebastian nodded slowly, his eyes still on Milo. "Yes, and let's move to the loft studio. More natural light." He turned back to Milo, a spark of renewed purpose in his eyes. "Milo, tell me, when you're drawing, what do you feel? What drives you?" Milo, momentarily taken aback by the personal question in a professional setting, hesitated. "It's a need to understand, to connect, to show what I see that others might miss." Sebastian's lips curved into a slow, genuine smile. "Exactly. That's what I want to capture. Not just the face, but the mind behind it. The quiet strength." He gestured towards the changing room. "Eleanor, find him something comfortable, something that feels like him. And let's lose the studio lighting. We'll work with the window." As Milo changed into a simple charcoal grey sweater and soft linen trousers, he could hear Sebastian's voice, now more animated, discussing angles and moods with his team. When he re-entered the studio, the atmosphere was palpably different. The harsh studio lights were off, replaced by the soft, diffused glow from a massive window overlooking the city. Sebastian waited, his camera resting at his side, a pensive look on his face. "Sit here," Sebastian instructed, indicating a low leather armchair by the window. "Just be. Think about your art, your world." Milo settled into the chair, the soft leather molding to his form. He looked out at the sprawling cityscape, the distant skyscrapers blurring into a mosaic of grey and silver. He thought of his quiet studio, the scent of turpentine and old paper, the way a charcoal stick felt in his fingers. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the sun on his face ground him. When he opened them, Sebastian was there. Not with the powerful flash of a studio camera, but with a smaller, almost intimate lens, capturing him in the natural light. There was no longer a sense of demanding performance, but rather an invitation to reveal, And in the quiet click of the shutter, Milo felt a strange, burgeoning connection, a sense that Sebastian wasn't just taking his picture, but truly seeing him. Perfect, Sebastian murmured, a genuine satisfaction in his voice. Absolutely perfect. He lowered the camera, his gaze lingering on Milo, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. I think we've found it. An invented reason. Hold it just like that, Sebastian murmured, his voice a low thrum that vibrated through the quiet studio. The golden hour, now a memory, had yielded to the focused beam of a single softbox, painting Milo's face with a gentle luminosity. He leaned against a distressed brick wall, a prop Sebastian had resurrected from storage, his expression thoughtful, a faint crease etched between his brows. The previous high-energy poses felt a lifetime away. This was something entirely different, intimate. Eleanor, ever efficient, had already begun stowing the heavier equipment. That's a wrap on the Urban Solitude series then? She asked, a hint of weariness tracing her words. Sebastian ignored her, his eye glued to the viewfinder. He wasn't merely looking at Milo. He was perceiving him, truly apprehending him. The way the light caught the nascent stubble on his jaw, the subtle upturn of his lips even in repose, the profound depth in his eyes that had been so carefully veiled earlier. A familiar spark ignited within him, a potent signal that he wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. He lowered the camera, a slow smile unfurling across his face. Actually, Eleanor, I think we need a few more. For ambience. You know, to truly flesh out the collection. A different kind of mood, perhaps. He met Milo's gaze, a silent question hovering in the air. Milo's eyes, still reflecting the soft illumination, widened almost imperceptibly. He'd felt it too, that subtle shift in the atmosphere, the unspoken understanding that had blossomed between them over the past hour. He'd anticipated heading home, creatively spent but satisfied. Now, a different kind of anticipation hummed beneath his skin. More shots? He asked, his voice a little hoarse. Precisely, Sebastian confirmed, his gaze lingering. Something more introspective, less about the concept, more about the intrinsic feeling. We could use a few for a potential Artist's Muse series, perhaps. Something that really captures the essence of inspiration. He knew he was rambling, concocting an excuse on the fly, but the words spilled out, propelled by an instinct he hadn't felt in years. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, a knowing glint in her eyes. She'd worked with Sebastian long enough to recognize the nascent stirrings of a new obsession. Artist's Muses series, huh? That's new, she remarked, her tone amused rather than critical. All right, Sebastian, just say the word if you need me to adjust anything. She began to unpack a few select lenses, her movements fluid and practiced. Sebastian turned back to Milo. How do you feel about staying a little longer? We could try some different lighting, perhaps in the lounge area, with the city lights as a backdrop. Milo pushed off the wall, a lightness in his step he hadn't felt since his arrival. I'd like that, he said, his voice soft but firm. The feeling was mutual, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The transition to the lounge was seamless. Eleanor dimmed the studio lights, allowing the distant urban glow to become the primary illumination. Sebastian positioned a single, bare bulb, its warm light sculpting long shadows. He handed Milo a well-worn leather-bound journal, its pages filled with faded sketches. Just be with it, he instructed, his voice gentler now, less directorial. Imagine you're sketching, lost in thought. Milo settled onto a plush velvet armchair, the journal open in his hands. The air was thick with a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft click of Sebastian's camera. Sebastian didn't bark instructions. Instead, he offered observations, almost conversational prompts. "What kind of art do you create, Milo?" Sebastian asked, his voice low, as if to preserve the delicate balance they'd found. Milo looked up, a faint smile playing on his lips. Mostly charcoal, sometimes oils, landscapes often, or abstract forms that emerge from the subconscious. He gestured vaguely with the journal. "I try to capture the fleeting, the emotional." "The emotional," Sebastian echoed, his camera poised. "I try to do that too, in my own way, to capture the truth beneath the surface." He took a few more shots, the light glinting off Milo's thoughtful expression. "Do you listen to music when you work?" "Always. Classical. Often. Or jazz that's a little melancholic. Something that lets my mind wander, but keeps it grounded." Their conversation flowed like a quiet stream, meandering through shared interests and individual passions. They spoke of favorite books, obscure documentaries, the best coffee shops in the city. Each question, each answer felt like another thread woven into a nascent tapestry. Sebastian found himself talking more than he usually did during a shoot, sharing snippets of his own life, his own artistic struggles. He felt an ease with Milo, a sense of genuine curiosity that surprised him. He'd always maintained a professional distance with his models, a boundary that now felt irrelevant, almost obstructive. Eleanor, observing from the periphery, noticed the shift. Sebastian's focus wasn't just on the angles or the lighting. It was on Milo's genuine presence, the quiet intensity that radiated from him. The camera clicks grew less frequent, replaced by the hushed cadence of their voices. This wasn't just a photo shoot, it was a conversation, a nascent connection unfolding in the soft, warm glow of the studio. As the hours stretched, the city lights outside began to blur, and inside, something new began to take shape. The artistic obsession. "Just one more angle, Eleanor," Sebastian murmured, his eye pressed to the viewfinder, completely oblivious to the amused glint in his assistant's eyes. The light is just catching his jawline in a way that suggests a certain melancholic resolve. It's crucial for the ascendance narrative. Eleanor, perched on a rolling stool beside a meticulously organized table of lenses and reflectors, stifled a giggle. This was the fifth crucial angle Sebastian had discovered in the last hour, each one necessitating a complete rejigging of the lighting and a fresh roll of film. What had started as a quick follow-up to the Urban Solitude series had morphed into an almost daily ritual, Sebastian citing everything from the need to capture the subtle shift of emotion in the late afternoon glow to the profound silence emanating from his collarbone. Milo, initially surprised by Sebastian's sudden insistence on extending their collaboration, now found himself looking forward to the sessions with a quiet eagerness he hadn't experienced in years. The studio, once just a sterile workplace, had begun to feel like a haven. Sebastian's focus was absolute, a palpable energy that enveloped Milo, making him feel seen in a way he never had before. There was a unique intimacy in being the sole subject of such intense artistic scrutiny, a feeling of being completely understood without needing to utter a single word. Today, Sebastian had him draped across a velvet chaise, one hand resting lightly on a stack of worn art books. The natural light, filtered through a large north-facing window, cast soft shadows that danced across Milo's face as he shifted, almost imperceptibly, under Sebastian's direction. "Excellent, Milo. Hold that. Just breathe into it," Sebastian instructed, his voice a low rumble. He wasn't just taking pictures, he was trying to coax something deeper from within Milo, to draw out the quiet strength that lay beneath his unassuming exterior. Eleanor watched, a knowing smile playing on her lips as she adjusted a snoot on a strobe light. She'd seen Sebastian become consumed by a project before, but never with this particular intensity, this almost feverish drive. Milo held his breath, then exhaled slowly, feeling the fabric of the chaise beneath his fingers, the cool air on his skin. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting Sebastian's words wash over him. He wasn't posing. He was existing, allowing Sebastian to witness and capture that existence. It was a vulnerable space, yet remarkably comfortable. The silence between clicks of the camera wasn't empty. It was filled with a shared understanding, a burgeoning connection that transcended the professional. "Okay, Elena," Sebastian finally announced, lowering the camera and rubbing his temples. "I think we've nailed the quiet contemplation series, but I'm sensing a nascent energy, a readiness for flight. We need to capture that. Something with movement, perhaps. Tomorrow, we'll try something with flowing fabric, something ethereal." Eleanor simply nodded, suppressing another smile. "Of course, Sebastian. Ethereal, flowing fabric. Got it." She started packing up the equipment, her movements efficient. Milo pushed himself up from the chaise, stretching his limbs. He felt a pleasant exhaustion, a mental clearing that came from hours of focused stillness. Flowing fabric sounds interesting, he mused aloud, a faint smile touching his lips. Sebastian turned to him, his eyes alight with an almost boyish enthusiasm. "It will be. Imagine the subtle ripple, the suggestion of wind. It will speak volumes about the spirit breaking free." He walked closer, his gaze sweeping over Milo's face. "You have that capacity within you, Milo, that quiet strength waiting to unfurl." Milo felt a blush creep up his neck. Sebastian's belief in him was both exhilarating and a little daunting. He found himself wanting to live up to that artistic vision, to embody the narrative Sebastian saw in him. He realized with a jolt that he wasn't just a model anymore. He was a canvas, a co-conspirator in a grand artistic experiment. And he wanted to see where Sebastian's brushstrokes would take them next. The thought brought with it a distinct flutter in his chest, a kind of hopeful anticipation. As they walked out of the studio, the last rays of the setting sun painted the city in hues of orange and purple. Sebastian was already talking about fabric textures and wind machines, his mind buzzing with ideas for tomorrow. Milo listened, a quiet contentment settling over him. He was no longer counting the hours until the shoot ended, but rather anticipating the moment Sebastian's lens would once again find him, pulling forth another hidden facet of his evolving self. The artistic obsession, it seemed, was becoming a shared journey. Beyond the lens, the familiar click of the lens cap, a punctuation mark, signaled the session's close. The studio, typically a vortex of focused intent, exhaled into a soft murmur. Milo stretched, a pleasant ache blooming in muscles disciplined by Sebastian's precise vision. He'd grown fluent in Sebastian's silent language, anticipating the subtle shift in his gaze that promised a fresh perspective, a new emotional register. Today's shoot had delved deep. Sebastian had meticulously explored Milo's hands, the labyrinthine lines of his palms, the way his fingers cradled a worn paintbrush. It was a facet Milo had never deemed significant until Sebastian's lens illuminated it. "Tea?" Sebastian offered, already pouring from a thermos into 2 ceramic mugs. The fragrant steam of Earl Grey unfurled, a soothing counterpoint to the studio's industrial edges. Milo nodded, settling onto a low stool opposite Sebastian. The light, now gentle and diffused, sculpted soft hollows and planes on Sebastian's face, emphasizing the thoughtful furrow in his brow. This seamless pivot from intense artistic direction to relaxed conversation had become their natural cadence. You have a knack for making the ordinary profound, Milo mused, stirring honey into his tea. Sebastian met his gaze, a faint smile playing on his lips. That's the photographer's privilege, isn't it? To unearth the narrative in everything. He paused, his expression softening as he looked at Milo. But you, Milo, you make it effortless. There's a universe in your eyes. A familiar warmth unfurled in Milo, a blend of appreciation and something deeper, a sense of being truly perceived. For years, he'd felt like a background detail, an anonymous observer. Now, he was the axis, not just of a lens, but of another person's complete attention. What about you, Sebastian? Milo shifted the focus. What's your story beyond the viewfinder? Sebastian leaned back, a rare moment of self-reflection. My narrative is typically woven through others, through the images I craft. He sipped his tea. But if I were to look past that, I suppose I'm still chasing something, a particular kind of truth perhaps. The admission hung delicate in the air, a fragile offering. Milo felt drawn to this glimpse of vulnerability, a mirror to his own unspoken depths. What kind of truth? Milo gently probed. Sebastian's eyes became distant for a moment before he replied. The kind that resonates. The kind that makes you feel a little less isolated. Then, his full attention returned to Milo, a directness that could be disarming. And you, Milo? What resonates with you? What dreams do you harbor, outside the confines of my artistic net? Milo almost chuckled. The question, deceptively simple, felt monumental. He rarely articulated his dreams, even to himself. They were fragile, nascent things, easily crushed by the weight of practicality. But Sebastian's gaze held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. I dream of creating, Milo confessed, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. Not just being created, if that makes sense. I want to make things that hold that kind of truth you mentioned, things that resonate. Sebastian's eyebrows lifted slightly, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. What kind of things? Milo traced the rim of his mug. Art. My own art. Paintings mostly. Abstracts. But I've never truly pursued it. I always felt I wasn't good enough, or that it was a frivolous pursuit. A flush crept up his neck, the raw vulnerability of the confession palpable. Sebastian remained silent for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. Milo braced himself for dismissal, a polite change of subject. Instead, Sebastian leaned forward, his voice low and earnest. Milo, he said, the single word imbued with conviction. There is nothing frivolous about creation. It's one of the most fundamental human impulses. And knowing you, seeing the depth within you, I have no doubt your art would be extraordinary. The unexpected encouragement washed over Milo like a gentle wave, eroding years of self-doubt. To hear Sebastian, whose artistic vision he so admired, speak such words of belief was transformative. It wasn't merely a compliment. It was an invitation, a permission slip to embrace a hidden facet of himself. You truly think so? Milo asked, his voice barely a whisper. I know so, Sebastian affirmed, a genuine warmth in his smile. And I, for one, would be very interested in seeing it. Perhaps, he added, a playful glint in his eyes. We could explore that side of you in our next session. Your art, through my lens. A surge of exhilaration pulsed through Milo, a sense of boundless possibility. The idea of Sebastian, the meticulous photographer, turning his lens to Milo's burgeoning artistic endeavors, was both daunting and electrifying. It was a leap beyond modeling, Beyond being merely a subject, it was a step toward a shared creative odyssey, a deeper exploration of Milo's own soul, guided by Sebastian's unwavering faith. The anticipation for their next encounter, already keen, now vibrated with a new, vibrant energy, a new kind of warmth. Outside Sebastian's studio, the city lights bled into a painter's smear of color, an urban constant he rarely registered. Tonight, however, the familiar thrum of traffic and distant sirens seemed to resonate with an unfamiliar hum within himself. He was deep into editing Milo's latest photo shoot, a session that had stretched long into the evening. Each mouse click brought a fresh angle of Milo's face into sharp relief. The subtle inclination of his head, the nascent stubble catching the light along his jawline, the profound depths that seemed to reside permanently in his eyes. This wasn't merely professional satisfaction. Sebastian had worked with countless models, each a vessel for his artistic vision. But Milo was an anomaly. Hours after Milo had left, after the equipment was stowed and the last crew member departed, Sebastian found his thoughts persistently returning to him, not to the upcoming shoot, nor the collection's impending launch, but to Milo himself, to the quiet intensity in his voice as he spoke of his own paintings, a vulnerability Sebastian hadn't anticipated, to the shy smile that utterly transformed his features. This persistent mental presence was a novel sensation, a gentle thrum beneath the surface of his usual focused calm. Sebastian, whose life revolved around his work, found this intrusion both perplexing and strangely welcome. A few days later, after an especially demanding shoot had left them both running on fumes, Sebastian found himself suggesting dinner. "There's a small place around the corner," he offered, his voice a little raspy from a day of directing. "Great pasta, my treat." Milo, tired but radiating a quiet contentment, nodded. "Sounds good. I'm starving." The restaurant was a cozy, dimly lit Italian spot, a world away from Sebastian's usual polished haunts. The comforting aroma of garlic and simmering tomatoes filled the air, a remarkably grounding scent. They settled into a booth with red faux leather worn smooth by time and ordered. Conversation flowed easily, a natural extension of the creative dialogue they'd cultivated in the studio. Milo described his initial ideas for paintings, the colors he envisioned, the emotions he hoped to evoke. Sebastian listened, truly listened, offering insights and encouragement, not as a creative director to a model, but as one artist to another. He even found himself sharing anecdotes from his own early days, stories he rarely recounted, tales of struggle and triumph that felt surprisingly safe to reveal with Milo. As the evening deepened and their pasta plates were cleared, a comfortable quiet settled between them. The restaurant had emptied considerably, leaving them in a soft cocoon of privacy. Sebastian watched Milo across the table, the flickering candlelight softening the angles of his face. There was a genuine ease in Milo's presence, an unpretentious quality Sebastian found profoundly refreshing. He realized, with a jolt both subtle and significant, that this was a new kind of warmth. It wasn't the fleeting heat of passion he'd known with past lovers, nor the comfortable camaraderie of long-standing friendships. This was something softer, more expansive, a pervasive sense of belonging that settled deep in his chest. It was the warmth of shared understanding, of being truly seen and truly seeing in return. It felt like coming home to a place he hadn't known he was looking for. Milo caught his gaze, a slight flush rising on his cheeks, but his eyes held a steady, open expression that invited Sebastian further in. "Thank you for tonight," Milo said softly, his voice a balm, "and for everything." Sebastian felt an unbidden, genuine smile bloom on his face. My pleasure, Milo. Truly. The words felt inadequate, unable to capture the unexpected richness of the evening, or the way Milo had irrevocably altered the landscape of Sebastian's internal world. He knew, with a certainty that resonated through him, that this feeling, this new kind of warmth, was something he wasn't willing to let go of. Unfamiliar feelings. The scent of roasted coffee beans usually brought Sebastian a sense of calm, a familiar anchor in his often turbulent creative process. Today, however, as he sat in his sun-drenched studio, the aroma only amplified the unsettling churn in his stomach. Milo. The name itself was a soft hum in his mind, persistent and disorienting. He'd spent the morning staring at the contact sheet from their last shoot, not seeing the nuances of light or composition, but rather the quiet intensity in Milo's eyes, the curve of his smile, the way his hair fell across his forehead. It wasn't just aesthetic appreciation anymore. It was something deeper, something that resonated in a place he hadn't known existed. A warmth, a pull, a desire to be closer, to understand more. He'd never felt this with any woman he'd dated. There had always been affection, respect, sometimes even passion, but never this profound sense of being seen, of an unspoken understanding that transcended words. He pushed the contact sheet away, the glossy surface catching the light and glinting mockingly. This is absurd, he thought, running a hand through his hair. His dating history was a clear, straight line. Women. Always women. From fleeting college romances to serious, long-term relationships, his emotional landscape had been exclusively female. The idea of feeling this for a man was foreign, an anomaly that threatened to upend his entire perception of himself. A sharp rap on his studio door startled him. Chloe, his longtime assistant and friend, bustled in, a whirlwind of vibrant scarf and clinking bangles. Sebastian, ready for the layout meeting? The publisher's on the line, practically vibrating with excitement over the latest shots. They think Ascendance is going to redefine. Sebastian, are you even listening? He blinked, pulling himself back from the swirling vortex of his thoughts. Oh, Chloe. Yes, sorry, just lost in thought. Chloe, ever perceptive, narrowed her eyes. Lost in thought or lost in space? You look like you just wrestled a bear and lost. What's going on? And don't tell me it's creative block, because I just saw the prints. They're stunning. Especially those new ones of Milo. He's got such presence. She paused, her gaze lingering on Sebastian's face. You've been different since you started working with him, you know. Quieter, but also softer, somehow. Like you found a missing piece of a puzzle. Sebastian felt a flush creep up his neck. Don't be ridiculous, Chloe. It's just a professional collaboration. He's a remarkable model, that's all. He tried to inject a casualness into his voice that he didn't feel. Chloe simply hummed, a knowing sound that grated on his already frayed nerves. Right. Just a professional collaboration. Just like the way you practically glow when you talk about his artistic vision, or how you insist on personally styling every single shot with him. You haven't done that with a model in years. She picked up a stray print of Milo, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. There's a spark here, Sebastian. A real one. The word spark ignited a fresh wave of panic within him. He had felt a spark. A bonfire, more like. He cleared his throat. Look, Chloe, I appreciate your observations, but I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind with the collection. Now, the publisher, what do they need? He steered the conversation firmly back to work. But Chloe's words had planted a seed of doubt, validating the confusing emotions swirling within him. He spent the rest of the day in a haze, barely registering the details of the layout meeting, his mind replaying every interaction with Milo, every lingering gaze, every shared laugh. That evening, alone in his apartment, the silence was deafening. He poured himself a whiskey, the amber liquid swirling like his thoughts. This wasn't just a spark, he admitted to himself. This was an undeniable, visceral attraction, and it terrified him. He was Sebastian Thorne, the man who dated sophisticated, witty women who had a perfectly curated life. This was uncharted territory, a seismic shift that threatened to dismantle everything he thought he knew about himself. He paced his living room, the city lights twinkling outside his window, mocking his internal turmoil. He couldn't be feeling this. It was wrong. It was unexpected. He had to stop it before it went any further, before he made a fool of himself, before he hurt Milo. He picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over Milo's contact. A dinner invitation, a casual text, an excuse to see him again. The temptation was immense, a siren's call he struggled to resist. But then a harsh reality crashed down. This wasn't fair to Milo, to lead him on, to explore a curiosity he wasn't sure he was ready for, when he was so clearly confused himself. With a heavy sigh, Sebastian put the phone down. He couldn't. He had to create some distance, to clear his head, to understand what these unfamiliar feelings truly meant. It was the only responsible thing to do. He would tell Chloe to handle the next few shoots, to give him some space. It was a difficult decision, one that left a hollow ache in his chest. But he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that it was the right one. For now, at least. The sudden silence. The crisp snap of the Polaroid developing had always been a comforting sound to Sebastian, a small punctuation mark in the symphony of a successful shoot. Today, it felt like a gunshot, echoing his internal turmoil. He stared at the nascent image, Milo, bathed in the soft glow of a single key light, eyes reflecting a depth Sebastian found both intoxicating and terrifying. His thumb traced the outline of Milo's jaw, a possessive gesture he immediately recoiled from. Sebastian? Everything all right? Eleanor's voice, usually a gentle hum in the background, cut through his haze. She stood beside him, a tablet clutched in her hand, a subtle question in her gaze. He cleared his throat, the sound rough. No, it's not. He turned from the lightbox, avoiding her eyes. Cancel the rest of the day and the week. Everything with Milo. Eleanor blinked, her brow furrowing. The Ascendance collection? But we're just getting started. The mood boards are finalized. The stylists are booked. Marcus called this morning, practically giddy about the momentum. Cancel it, Sebastian repeated, his voice flat, devoid of its usual authority. He walked to the window, staring out at the muted city skyline, the concrete canyon suddenly feeling oppressive. Just cancel it all. I need to rethink. Eleanor, sensing the unyielding wall in his tone, simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his decree. She turned to make the calls, her movements efficient but tinged with a visible confusion. Milo, who had been patiently waiting for the next setup, overheard the tail end of the conversation. He watched Eleanor's retreating back, then Sebastian's rigid posture by the window. A cold dread seeped into his bones. He'd never seen Sebastian like this. Distant, unreadable, his usual vibrant energy replaced by a heavy, almost mournful silence. He approached cautiously. Sebastian, is everything okay? His voice was soft, hesitant. Sebastian flinched, as if startled by a sudden noise. He turned. His eyes, usually so intense and focused, now seemed to skate over Milo, not truly seeing him. Milo, yes, no, look, we're done for the day, for the week. I need a break from everything. Milo felt a pang of something sharp and unfamiliar. He searched Sebastian's face for an explanation, a hint of what he'd done wrong. Had he posed incorrectly? Had his eyes conveyed the wrong emotion? He replayed every interaction, every shared glance, every quiet laugh. Had he overstepped? Did I do something wrong? He asked, the words barely a whisper. Sebastian's jaw tightened. No, Milo, it's not you. It's me. I can't right now. He waved a dismissive hand, a gesture that physically pushed Milo away. Go home. I'll be in touch. But he wasn't. Days bled into a week, then two. The studio, once a vibrant hub of creative energy, now felt like a mausoleum. Sebastian holed himself up, reviewing old work, sketching abstract concepts, anything to avoid the unsettling images of Milo that invaded his thoughts. He ignored Chloe's increasingly pointed texts, Eleanor's worried calls, and Marcus's baffled voicemails. Milo, meanwhile, was adrift. The sudden cessation of their work, of their daily conversations, left a gaping void. He walked through his quiet apartment, the silence amplifying the ache in his chest. He missed Sebastian's booming laugh, the way his eyes would light up when he captured a perfect shot, the unexpected profundity of their discussions on art, on life, on the hidden corners of their souls. He missed the way Sebastian had seen him, truly seen him, beyond the surface of his features. It was a connection he hadn't realized he craved until it was abruptly severed. He stared at his phone, willing it to ring, to vibrate with a message from Sebastian. He scrolled through old emails, searching for a clue, a sign, anything to explain the sudden, deafening silence. Had it all been an illusion? Had he misinterpreted the intensity in Sebastian's gaze, the careful way he'd adjusted a stray strand of hair, the lingering touch on his shoulder? The loss wasn't just professional, it was a profound, personal grief. He felt a deep, unsettling sadness, a pervasive sense of emptiness that left him restless and alone. He just wanted to understand. A distant echo. The clinking of ice in his whiskey glass was a dull counterpoint to the polite, if somewhat strained conversation across the table. Her name was Amelia, a striking blonde with an easy laugh and an even easier smile. She was everything he usually gravitated towards. Accomplished, beautiful, and utterly uncomplicated. Yet, as she recounted an amusing anecdote about her recent trip to Tuscany, Sebastian found himself staring not at her animated face, but at the reflection of the restaurant's opulent chandelier in his drink, its multifaceted gleam somehow reminding him of the way light caught in Milo's hair when they'd been shooting in the late afternoon sun. He tried to focus. Amelia was talking about truffles, a truffle-hunting pig, specifically. Sebastian offered a non-committal chuckle, a practice sound that usually sufficed. But even as he made it, a memory surfaced unbidden. Milo, hunched over a steaming mug of black coffee, describing the subtle nuances of charcoal grey with an intensity that made Sebastian's own artistic sensibilities hum. He'd leaned forward then, captivated, not just by the words but by the subtle crinkling at the corners of Milo's eyes, the way his lips moved, shaping thoughts into sound. Sebastian, are you all right? Amelia's voice, a delicate chide, pulled him back. Apologies, Amelia. Just a long day. He forced a more genuine smile, attempting to re-engage. He asked her about her work, about the art gallery she managed, trying to steer the conversation back to safe, familiar ground. She spoke eloquently, her passion for contemporary art evident, but his mind kept drifting, a rogue current pulling him further and further from the present moment. He saw Milo's hands, paint-stained and expressive, gesturing as he explained the emotional architecture of a piece. He heard Milo's quiet, thoughtful questions about Sebastian's own artistic process, questions that had peeled back layers Sebastian hadn't even known he possessed. Later that week, he accepted another dinner invitation, this time with a different woman, Sarah, an architect he'd briefly dated years ago. She was witty, intelligent, and they shared a history, however fleeting. He thought the familiarity might ground him. It didn't. Across a table laden with tapas, Sarah spoke animatedly about a new project, her eyes sparkling. Sebastian nodded, contributed where necessary, but found himself comparing her lively chatter to Milo's quiet observations, the way Milo often chose a single, perfectly weighted sentence over a flurry of words. He remembered Milo's profound silences, how they weren't empty, but pregnant with unspoken understanding, a comfortable space Sebastian had never known he craved. He even tried revisiting old haunts, the kind of vibrant, noisy bars where he used to effortlessly charm and be charmed. He ordered his usual, a potent gin and tonic, and surveyed the crowd, looking for that spark, that easy connection he'd always found. He saw attractive faces, heard snippets of laughter and conversation, but it all felt flat. The vibrant energy he once thrived on now seemed superficial, a thin veneer over something hollow. He thought of the quiet intensity of Milo's gaze, the way it seemed to strip away pretense, seeing directly into him. He remembered the feeling of being truly seen, truly understood, not just admired for his success or reputation. Chloe's increasingly pointed texts didn't help. Still ghosting your muse, Seb? Not a good look. Followed by, he seemed really invested, you know? And finally, a direct, are you seriously going to pretend that wasn't something? He ignored them, just as he ignored the gnawing in his stomach, the restless nights, and the way every single conversation, every fleeting glance, every echo of laughter seemed to filter through the lens of Milo's absence. He couldn't shake the image of Milo's bewildered, heartbroken eyes the last time they'd spoken, a raw vulnerability that had torn at something deep inside him. He had inflicted that pain, and now, try as he might to distract himself, to revert to old patterns, he found himself utterly unable to escape the distant echo of Milo's smile, the lingering resonance of their shared vulnerability, and the unsettling realization that everything that once satisfied him now felt like a pale imitation of something far more profound. He was trying to date, but he was really just performing, going through the motions, because every fiber of his being was still resonating with the quiet hum of Milo. The realization. The studio air, thick with the ghosts of forgotten meals and cold coffee, bore witness to Sebastian's frantic attempt to outrun himself. Amelia's laughter, a once familiar melody, now felt like a garbled transmission from a distant shore, stripped of its resonance. Sarah's touch, formerly a comfort, left behind only a phantom chill. He sat amidst a tempest of fashion glossies and half-formed sketches, the page's vibrant hues a cruel mockery of his inner world's stark monochrome. Every image, every line, every subtle shift of shadow seemed to contort, resolving into Milo's quiet intensity. The elegant curve of his cheekbone, the precise angle of his jaw. His fingers closed around a discarded charcoal stick, its gritty texture a familiar anchor. Without conscious direction, his hand moved, articulating a profile on the pristine paper, a distinctive nose, lips poised in thoughtful silence, eyes that seemed to hold entire constellations. It was Milo, undeniably. And as he gazed at the nascent portrait, the fractured pieces of his recent past coalesced with startling clarity. This wasn't mere confusion, nor a transient infatuation, a novel detour from his well-trodden path. This was something transformative, a seismic shift that had reconfigured the very bedrock of his being. The disquiet he'd felt with Amelia and Sarah hadn't been about them. Not truly. It was about the cavernous void Milo's absence had carved into his life. A chasm no amount of familiar affection could bridge. He'd been trying to force a square peg into a round hole, attempting to fan dying embers when an entirely new incandescent blaze had ignited. A sudden, piercing insight cleaved through the haze of his denial. He wasn't merely attracted to Milo. He was drawn to the profound authenticity Milo elicited, the permission to shed the meticulously constructed facades Sebastian had worn for decades. Milo saw him, truly saw him, beyond the flash and the acclaim. Milo had made him feel actual. And in pushing Milo away, he hadn't protected himself. He had amputated a vital limb of who he was becoming. The charcoal stick fractured in his grip, the sharp crack echoing in the suddenly silent studio. His breath hitched, a tidal wave of emotion crashing over him. This wasn't just a feeling, it was an epiphany, a tectonic reordering of his self-perception. This wasn't a choice in the conventional sense, it was an inevitability, a truth that had been slowly unfurling beneath the surface of his awareness, now fully bloomed. He conjured Milo's hands, steady and deliberate, adjusting a sleeve during a fitting. The almost imperceptible tremor when their fingers had brushed. He recalled the silent hum of Milo's presence in a bustling room, a singular anchor in the chaotic tides of his existence. He remembered the gentle critiques, the insightful observations that had expanded Sebastian's artistic horizons. It wasn't solely the physical, though that was undeniable. It was the intellectual intimacy, the emotional resonance, the profound sense of being understood. The phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from Chloe. Still trying to date yourself back into the closet, Sebastian? It's not a good look. Her words, usually an irritant, now resonated with uncomfortable truth. He had been trying to shoehorn himself back into a life that no longer fit. The old narratives, the established patterns, felt like ill-fitting garments. He pushed himself from the stool, the abrupt movement sending a stack of prints tumbling. Milo's face stared up at him from the glossy paper, a striking black and white portrait from their first collaboration. The intensity in those eyes, the subtle vulnerability, the raw, unadulterated beauty. It was all there, everything he'd been so desperately trying to ignore. A profound urgency seized him, a desperate need to mend the damage, to bridge the chasm he had so foolishly created. This wasn't confusion. This was clear, terrifying, exhilarating certainty. He had to tell Milo. He had to make him understand. The fear of rejection was a cold knot in his stomach, but it was dwarfed by a fiercer, burning conviction. He couldn't live without knowing if this profound connection, this undeniable pull, could be reciprocated. He couldn't live without trying. He had to act. A shaky call. The phone in Sebastian's grasp felt like a leaden anchor, a sleek, cold rectangle suddenly burdened with the gravity of his entire existence. Milo's name glowed on the screen, a familiar sight from countless logistical calls, shoot details, and casual check-ins. Now, it shimmered like a gateway to an uncharted realm. His thumb quivered above the call icon. The air in his opulent living room, typically a sanctuary of curated elegance, felt thin, charged with an almost painful anticipation. He inhaled deeply, the scent of expensive leather and old books failing to quell his racing heart. This wasn't merely a call, it was an incendiary device. Everything he'd known of himself, his desires, his life's trajectory, had been irrevocably reshaped in a single afternoon. The revelation that Milo was not just a muse, but the very marrow of his soul, had struck him with the force of a tsunami. And now, he had to articulate that, or at least, the desperate need to articulate it. His fingers finally closed around the device, pressing the call button. The mechanical chirps of the dial tone sounded like a doomsday countdown. Each ring amplified the hushed anxiety of the room. What could he say? How could he possibly condense the seismic shift that had just rattled his carefully constructed world into a coherent utterance? Rehearsal had been impossible. This was too raw, too visceral for scripts. Just as despair threatened to make him abandon the attempt, Milo's voice, a little husky, a touch sleepy, answered, "Hello?" Sebastian's breath caught. It was Milo. The man who had unknowingly unraveled him, then meticulously rewoven him into something truer, more authentic. "Milo," he croaked, his voice a strained whisper, barely recognizable even to himself. It sounded unsteady. He winced inwardly. So much for projecting an air of collected confidence. A beat of silence stretched on the other end, a subtle shift in ambient noise, suggesting Milo had perhaps sat up or focused entirely on the conversation. "Sebastian, is everything all right?" Milo's tone, laced with familiar, gentle concern, had always disarmed him. "Yes, no, yes, everything's different," Sebastian stammered, running a hand through his hair, a gesture unseen by Milo. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. This was harder than facing a room full of critics. I need to see you." Another pause. This one longer. Sebastian pictured Milo, brow furrowed in confusion, perhaps already sensing the altered dynamic, the new unspoken gravity. The silence stretched, thin and taut, threatening to snap. "See me?" Milo finally repeated, his voice cautious, the earlier concern subtly replaced by curiosity. "Is this about the new campaign visuals? I thought we were all set for the final edits next week." "No, not precisely." Sebastian forced himself to draw another breath, pushing past the tremor in his voice. Clarity was paramount. Honesty, essential. It's something else. Something important. More important than any campaign. He heard a faint rustle, perhaps Milo shifting, a sigh. "Sebastian, you sound uncharacteristically flustered. Is everything okay with you?" The genuine worry in Milo's voice was a balm, even as it underscored Sebastian's own distress. He longed to spill everything, right then, over the phone. But the words felt too immense, too fragile for a speaker. This demanded a face-to-face encounter. He needed to meet Milo's gaze, to gauge his reaction, to share the weight of this revelation. I'm fine. Just profoundly changed, I suppose," Sebastian admitted, a wry, self-deprecating laugh escaping him, devoid of humor. "Look, can we meet tonight? Please, it's urgent. I need to explain, in person." He heard Milo exhale slowly. "Tonight? It's a little late, Sebastian. Is something wrong?" "No. Yes. It's right. Everything is finally right, Milo. But I need to tell you why," Sebastian insisted, his voice still a little wobbly, but now imbued with a burgeoning conviction. The fear remained, a cold knot in his stomach. But beneath it, a powerful, undeniable current of hope began to surge. "Name a place, or I can come to you. Just let me see you." The line fell silent again, a deep pool of contemplation. Sebastian held his breath, every nerve ending tingling. This was the precipice, the moment that would either see their profound connection blossom into something explicit and undeniable, or witness a chasm opening between them. "Okay," Milo said finally, his voice softer, a hint of something unreadable in its tone. "My studio. Give me 20 minutes." The single word, "okay," was a fragile lifeline, yet it was enough. Sebastian felt a surge of adrenaline, a profound relief mingling with a fresh wave of panic. He had done it. He had taken the first step. Now, he just had to brave the plunge. "Thank you, Milo," Sebastian managed, the words thick with unspoken meaning. "I'll be there." He hung up, the phone now feeling impossibly light, its burden having transferred to his chest, a glorious, terrifying pressure. He had 20 minutes to compose himself, 20 minutes to gather the scattered fragments of his courage, 20 minutes before he would lay bare the entirety of his altered heart. The confession. The late afternoon sun, already low in the sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawns of the park. It was a place Sebastian often came to clear his head, a quiet oasis away from the city's ceaseless thrum. He'd chosen it precisely for its anonymity, the scattered couples and dog walkers providing a comforting buffer without intruding. Milo was already there, perched on a bench beneath a venerable oak, looking impossibly serene despite the urgency of Sebastian's call. He wore a faded denim jacket, a stark contrast to the tailored elegance Sebastian usually associated with him. And his hair, still tousled from sleep, caught the golden light like spun copper. Sebastian's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs as he approached. Every step felt heavy, each beat a drum roll to an unknown fate. Milo looked up, his eyes, usually so guarded, holding a flicker of concern. He offered a small, tentative smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice a soft murmur in the quiet air. "You sounded, anxious." Sebastian sat beside him, leaving a careful space between them. The bench felt cold beneath his hands. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but his hands felt clumsy, alien. "I am," he admitted, his voice rougher than he intended. He took a deep, shaky breath, the scent of damp earth and late blooming roses filling his lungs. "Milo, what I'm about to say, it's not easy." Milo simply watched him, patient and unwavering, his presence a balm and a challenge all at once. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant chirping of sparrows and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Sebastian's carefully constructed arguments, the eloquent words he'd rehearsed in his head, all dissolved into a formless dread. How did one articulate a truth that had upended an entire existence? He tried to start again, a different angle. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about what I wanted, about connections. He trailed off, gesturing vaguely with one hand. It felt like trying to grasp smoke. "It's all been turned inside out since you came into my life." Milo tilted his head, a subtle shift that spoke volumes. His gaze was searching, gentle, yet unwavering. "I felt it too, Sebastian. That intensity, that shift." His admission, quiet and unadorned, was a lifeline. It confirmed that he hadn't been imagining the unspoken currents between them, the profound resonance that had become their shared language. Emboldened, Sebastian pushed on. "I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it away, to put it in a box labeled artistic fixation or professional admiration." He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "God, I'm such an idiot. It was never just that, was it?" Milo's lips curved into a soft, melancholic smile. "No, it wasn't. Not for a long time." The raw honesty in Milo's words gave Sebastian the final push he needed. He turned fully towards Milo, his knee brushing against Milo's. The contact, however fleeting, sent a jolt through him, a lightning strike of confirmation. He looked into Milo's eyes, those deep pools of quiet understanding, and saw himself reflected there, raw and vulnerable. He took another deep breath, the scent of roses suddenly sharper, sweeter. The world seemed to narrow to this moment, to Milo's face, to the pounding of his own heart. He swallowed past the lump in his throat. "Milo," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, yet resonating with every ounce of his being. "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, solid and irreversible, a fragile moment, pregnant with possibility. Sebastian held his breath, every nerve ending screaming. He watched Milo's face, searching for any sign, any flicker of emotion, shock, confusion, rejection. But Milo didn't flinch. His expression softened, the earlier concern melting away to be replaced by something akin to relief. A slow, gentle smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes from within. It was a smile Sebastian had rarely seen, unburdened by the usual introspection, pure and utterly happy. And then Milo reached out. His fingers, warm and slender, found Sebastian's hand where it rested on his knee. He intertwined their fingers, a simple, profound gesture that spoke volumes. The touch was electric, anchoring Sebastian back to himself, to the reality of the moment. He squeezed Milo's hand, a silent affirmation of his own profound emotion. Milo's thumb brushed lightly over Sebastian's knuckles, a tender caress. "I was hoping you'd say that," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes shining with an unshed warmth. The relief that flooded Sebastian was so immense, so overwhelming, it almost brought him to his knees. He hadn't realized how tightly he'd been coiled, how much he'd been bracing for rejection. But there was none. Only this quiet acceptance, this gentle reciprocation. In that shared touch, beneath the golden light of the setting sun, a new beginning unfurled.